Well, hello out there. Okay, well, I don't care if I'm connected then. Good to go?
I think so.
Okay.
Like noon, I think. That's what they said.
Lovely sound of a microphone being clipped on. How's that sound? Oh, it sounds wonderful. Tyler, shall I interview you, or would you like to interview me?
We could do both.
Sure. Ready for me to start with you?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, my name is Lenny Frieling. I am a former judge practicing criminal defense attorney for 38 years. And I am joined today by Tyler Williams, who is one of the organizers of the Cannabis Symposium. And I am quite excited that next year we are set to do this on 4/20 because that's my anniversary. This year will be my 30th anniversary.
Congratulations.
And I have to admit, since there is no one in the room besides you and me, I believe I'm the one who talked Carol out of doing it on 4/20 this year because I didn't like the idea of competing with other 4/20 events. I wanted to have some of those people at the symposium.
Definitely.
We'd have Jason Lauv all over the state if we weren't careful.
Yeah.
So Tyler, what is your connection to the symposium, to the cannabis education area in general?
Well, with the Cannabis Symposium specifically, I was on the CUSG 420 task force last year as a student ambassador. At the time, I was the treasurer of Students for Sensible Drug Policy here at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And from that, I got involved with the Cannabis Symposium. It was the idea that we generated last year as a task force, and reached out, had several people, Jason Laub included, come out and speak with the university about cannabis. And that's really the idea, is just to foster the discussion. So, you know, I've been through the whole, both the prohibition side of it as well as the party side of it. I didn't see the origination of the 420 celebration, you know, here at CU. I kind of caught the tail end of it. My first year was the last year that they did it, the 10,000 people that showed up. You know, and I was kind of struck by how much it was fun, but it just didn't seem like any protest or rally I'd ever been to before. There wasn't really anybody speaking or educating. I just thought that there was a missed opportunity to these 10,000 people who showed up to be a part of something, you know, cannabis focused on 420. So then the next year, you know, the student government and the administration came together with the 420 task force again, came up with the idea for the fertilizer and shutting down the campus. And so kind of got to see that develop as well and play out, and you know, them spending the $250,000 a year on the enforcement of it, and I just thought that there would be a better way. So I started reaching out to the 420 task force. One of our law school students was on it a couple years ago, Rochelle Young, and she's been great. She works with MPP now.
Everyone out here knows Rochelle
Yeah.
well. She was instrumental in the Amendment 64 work and has been a champion. I think she was with SSDP.
Yeah, the law school chapter.
Yeah, the
here
law
at
school
Wolf.
chapter, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, which, as we know, is a highly effective group, and in Colorado, truly impressive in what they've done.
Definitely, definitely. And she was kind of my connection into the 420 task force. She had been there the year before working with them. And so she introduced me to Neela Ali, who I worked closely with last year to basically put together the first Cannabis Symposium. And then this year, we've been able to reach out to Carol and all of her connections and some of the funding sources that are available here at the university to really put together a much larger event. We brought out people from coast to coast. And so I was helping with the planning and that sort of, in the beginning. And yeah, I think, I'm just here speaking with you today to kind of talk about, some of the foundation, what it looks like this year with the live stream and everything that's going out. And then what kind of the future we hope for.
And speaking of the live stream, I'd like to give just a quick shout out to Time for Hemp, that's numeral 4, timeforhemp.cc, which is a 24/7 podcast dedicated to various anti-prohibition focuses, everything from marijuana music to once a week LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, radio hour. Let me ask you, jumping back a little bit, task forces, as I understand it, are generally tasked with something. What were you tasked with?
So we were tasked with finding a solution to the 420 opportunity. There was the acknowledgement that it wasn't going away. And so the student government created this task force to basically decide how to deal with it. And so, they had come up with the fertilizer solution, got some feedback from that, pivoted a little bit, and Students for Sensible Drug Policy came into the conversation, and between us and the student government, we've been able to put together this event.
From what I could tell from the famous magazine photograph of 420 before they shut the campus down, the party 420 with the famous 10,000 people, the cloud of smoke that rose from the field at 420 was truly impressive.
It was my first experience with that sort of level of protest. I came out here from Kansas, and so that was kind of my background. And I'm sure there's not very many clouds erupting.
Well, I've seen the cloud in Denver at their 420 event, and just in terms of magnitude, this put it to shame. In terms of the massive smoke, Denver was nothing.
I did wake up the next morning and looking at the Flatirons, there was a little bit of a haze still lingering at the base of the Flatirons.
One thing I did notice in Denver, where they had the big crowd, they had the microphone, they had speakers alternating with music throughout the day, and what I saw there was a crowd very interested in the party, very interested in smoking, inhaling, and when the speakers got up, they drew less than zero attention. The crowd could have cared less. So from what I've seen so far, combining the two did not work. Being a child of the 60s and having been through those demonstrations and ending a war, it was the opposite. People were interested in the speakers. And as I recall, there were people smoking here and there, but it was not the focus of the event as opposed to the 420 celebrations. Now, 420, I actually think was very considerate. I don't know who invented it, but 30 years ago, this April 20th, this 420 is my personal 30th anniversary. So having a holiday built around marijuana and our wedding anniversary just makes me very happy.
Yeah.
I think it was most considerate.
That sounds like a good anniversary date. I mean, yeah, no matter how things go, you guys always have that bond.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah, I guess it's been interesting to see all the different cultural incarnations of the 420. One of the recent, we had a gentleman speaking or asking a question earlier about the hash bash in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I just was fortunate enough to go to the 44th annual one this last year, and it was almost what you're describing, where there was a lot of smoking going on, and then not as much focus on some of the speakers and presenters, and there were some pretty big names, congressional legislatures and local legislatures, but the biggest response came from Tommy Chong. Everybody was tuned in and focused, and I think that's something that's very unique about the cannabis industry. Is there's this ingrained tradition, culture almost, that you can't get rid of. You can put any sort of coating on it that you want, and try to air it up and professionalize it, and follow the standard of other industries that they've set. But there's just something so unique about the cannabis industry that no matter, Tommy Chong's always going to be a great hit, and his message is going to land better than 90% of the people out there speaking. And
well, Tommy has such a magnetic personality. People are just drawn to him, and he really is a wonderful person.
Definitely. He
oh man, is he funny.
Had the best points. Yeah, he's a great guy.
We had him as a guest one year as a speaker and guest up at the Normal Legal Committee yearly meeting in Aspen. Nice. So we got some one-on-one time with him, and lower pressure environment. I don't think he can open his mouth and not be funny.
Yeah, I believe it. He's got that entertainment value, definitely.
I don't think most people know this, and I think it's true. Tommy Chong was in a band in Canada when he was a kid, and they had a very, very young guitar player in the band named Jimi Hendrix. And Hendrix left from there and ended up in California and grew up to be Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, I believe. That makes sense.
So, what's your thinking for next year? Wait and see what happens this year and build on that?
I think there is a lot of learning still to be done before the plans are finalized for next year. I do know that the April 20th date is reserved also the day before the 419, in case there is still some worry about that issue of whether or not the event can hold its own.
And the room that's reserved is the famous Glenn Miller Ballroom.
Glenn Miller Ballroom at the University Memorial Center here in Boulder, definitely. It's where all the big career fairs are held on campus, and a lot of the outreach between professional community and students.
And in fact, they just remodeled, I believe.
Yes, they
completed
did.
That.
It should be a really great event.
I believe the Chancellor's opening remarks were streamed also.
Yes.
And I have to say, the attitude that we heard both from the professor from the medical school and from the Chancellor of the university was, in my opinion, what one would hope to hear from an academic.
Oh, very much
Let's
so.
learn, let's study, let's get grants, let's jump through the hoops. We're not going to stick our head in the fish manure and hope it goes away, but rather than that, embracing it in an academic way. And I was very impressed by the
100%.
approach.
Yeah, it's been a great asset. The student government came to us and allowed us into this conversation to create this Cannabis Symposium in this space for the community and the students and the administration to come together and make these kind of decisions moving forward. And it's been very responsible and sensible of them, and I've been super impressed in all of my dealings with them. Before I started interacting with them, I kind of had some maybe not so choice words, but they've been very supportive, and a huge thanks goes to them.
During the Vietnam demonstrations, I do recall being slapped in the back of the head by the Chancellor of Ohio University. On the other hand, I was climbing on the hood of his car, and I suppose I can't really fault him much.
I suspect there would probably be a little bit more to that story, but
Well, I was taking a radical point of view. mass of the demonstration leadership at the time wanted to shut down the university, the position I took, which got tremendous support from the student body, was the last thing in the world we want to do is shut down the school. If we keep it open, we have thousands and thousands of people. We can demonstrate, we can do lots of things, get attention, we can accomplish something. If we shut the school down, everyone goes home for the summer. Nothing happens.
And I think that is one of the things that we do have to consider here is there is that legacy at Boulder for 420, and dealing with that moving forward. One of the gentlemen, asking questions with the chancellor, pointed that out, and at 420 on 420, a stoner's going to do what a stoner's going to do. How do we address that issue? Moving forward, is it we end before that time, and then the celebration starts about that time, and the university is not necessarily affiliated, but the greater town of Boulder is, or do what happens with those people, and can we bring that draw back? Because that was a huge financial force moving into Boulder every 420. I've spoken with many of the local establishment owners, and they definitely feel that loss of revenue. And they've considered, ways to bring it back. 420 in Boulder used to bring 8,000 people apparently in 2011. That's a lot of opportunity, not even just for education, but financial gain for the municipality of Boulder as well.
Has there been any discussion of charging admission to the campus for non-affiliates? I believe the chancellor refers to as faculty, staff, students. Charge $10 or $4.20 or whatever the right number is, without encouraging smoking, but at the same time at least have it pay for itself and make a profit.
100%. I think there is definitely, anytime there's a gathering, there's opportunities for sustainability, and I think that might be something to be discussed. Whether it's in the form of sponsorships or support from the administration and student government, which is how it's funded this year, primarily. Or if there is a big enough draw to, make it similar to something that happens like in Ann Arbor with the Hash Bash. There's no admission charge to come onto campus, but there is a street festival that goes along with it, where vendors come out and they set up shop, and they bring in the money, and maybe we could charge vendors to have that. There's definitely several opportunities for the sustainability of the event.
Well, at the end of the day, I'm sorry.
Charging admission for education. I think that's something specifically about the symposium that we want to keep it free, keep it open discourse.
For clarity, I am not suggesting any charge for the symposium. That's education, and either somebody's paying tuition or they're coming to the university as a guest for the day to learn something. And I would not encourage, and I'm not suggesting charging for that. I'm wondering about charging for people that just want to come and hang out on campus that day.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of the street fair. It does seem like, as you said, as you explained, an excellent opportunity. And after all, most of us are not communists. Most of us are capitalists. And to let that kind of an opportunity go by does seem to be counterproductive. On the other hand, 10,000 people sent up one hell of a cloud of smoke.
Yeah, there is.
And
it's definitely disruptive. I'm not gonna, beat around that bush. I think, there's just a solution.
Smoker or non-smoker, it's disruptive when, yes. couldn't agree more.
Especially in that small of a space. I don't know if you saw some of the drone pictures. It was standing room only.
That's what it looked like from what I could see in the pictures. I found it fascinating that when the chancellor was describing just the overall history of the university from the 60s and 70s through today, and how it went from a school with a well-earned, deserved party reputation to a school with 5 Nobel laureates. I have said that to people from all over the country about how CU has come along to be a major force in the academic world, and it's really wonderful to see.
And not only the academic world, I believe last year we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 or 7 national titles.
True.
So.
Am I right that if one wants to be an astronaut, one goes to the University of Colorado, or they're just confused?
I believe we have a very, very strong space program. Yeah, that's something around 30 astronauts have come out of the University of Colorado.
I think it's more than any other school, and not by a little bit. It's huge.
A big number.
And my impression is that virtually any rocket that goes up these days, putting any kind of experimental vehicle into orbit, into outer space, has at least one project that was designed and built on this campus.
Pretty fair to say.
So we're struggling, I guess, with the conflict between space and spaced.
Yes, yes. I think it's definitely a valid concern. But the more opportunities you have to be in the media and having that conversation, whether it's around being spaced or being space, the better that you can build the brand that you actually want. It's all opportunities in my eye. Every time that you get to be out in the limelight and having discussions, and I think this one around 420 at Boulder is a perfect discussion to be having right now at this time, at this juncture, and I think the way that it's handled is going to say a lot about where the university is going and the future of the legalization of cannabis and culture in general.
The chancellor pointed out that it seems marijuana use on campus may be shrinking a bit since legalization, since Amendment 64 took effect January. What are you seeing? Are you seeing any particular change? More people smoking, less people smoking?
I'm actually a recent graduate, so that's why I kind of said earlier with the symposium, I've taken recently a hands-off kind of approach. It's been orchestrated a lot by the students. They would definitely be a much better, outlet for that discussion. But I've seen that across the board in Colorado. I think is a little bit of the loss of, I don't want to say coolness, but a certain edge maybe that it had, and it's just not as big of an issue anymore. I feel like you still see it as much, maybe a little bit more in the public eye than it was before Amendment 64 passed. It's just not as many people are talking about it. It's not as big of an issue.
I think what I'm seeing with the older folks, I think what I'm seeing is the same people that were smoking before legalization are the people that are smoking now. Every once in a while I run into somebody who says, I haven't smoked since college, and maybe I think I will try a joint again because I'm curious. But there's no question in my mind that we are not seeing a flood of new smokers. We have the same smokers. Now they're going to the store and buying it legally and seem pretty pleased with it overall.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I worked as a bud tender in the industry for a year. There's a wide variety. I think the majority are people that were already smoking. Everybody seemed pretty comfortable with it. There were a couple people that I had to educate and kind of talk through how to hit a pipe or light it, spark up a joint. But I would say it's just less taboo. I think, you know, some of the people that even, you know, trying it now are still kind of out of touch, might have, you know, tried it already, you know, just with their friends if given the right opportunity. I think I hear the phrase a lot, coming out of the basement, with the new legalization, is especially in terms of officials in the public eye, celebrities, is, you know, it used to be like a big statement to come out and say, I smoke cannabis, I support the legalization. Nowadays, everybody's hopping on the train, you know. I'm pretty sure every presidential candidate so far has admitted, in the race in 2016, has admitted to some sort of use, or at least being open to the conversation, as opposed to, you know, back in the 90s and 80s and the 70s and the 60s, where everything was very drug war culture, being tough on crime, being tough on drug users.
Thank you, late President Nixon.
Yeah.
One of the things that I hear, which is amusing, not only are people more comfortable talking about what they're currently doing, but magically, people are more comfortable talking about what they were doing before legalization. Mm-hmm. And people are talking about, I've been smoking pot since I was 16, or whatever it was. So we're hearing more of the big picture, not just, well, since it was legal, yes, I've smoked since it was legal, but never before then.
Yeah.
That's just not what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and I think we'd have to probably look back in the papers and see what happened with Prohibition at the end of alcohol prohibition. And I'm sure, you know, there were several people who came out and saying they had been supportive of it the whole time, and maybe not as in the public eye. It worries me a little bit when everybody starts hopping on the bandwagon, but at the same time, you know, I just chuckle. You know, I'd rather that they see the light and start working for the right side than keeping the civil, not civil war, but infringement on civil rights is really the issue that I think SSDP resonates with the most, is the liberty to choose. You know, the freedom issue, I think, is identified a lot with not only cannabis prohibition, but you know, the larger drug war in general.
We know that prohibition doesn't work. The LEAP, LEAP.cc platform position is legalize all of these illicit drugs, regulate them, tax them, and switch the model, the prohibition model that we live with now, where a health problem is criminalized, and then we have people with a health problem and a criminal problem. Eliminate the criminal problem, and then they have a health problem. And we can deal with that. And as we at LEAP are fond of saying, you can cure an addiction. You cannot cure a conviction. And as a criminal defense attorney, of course, I'm running into that all the time, where records are ruining people's lives for things that should be personal liberties, not crimes. And they can be called victimless crimes, call it whatever you want. But if somebody goes home at night and smokes a joint in their living room, that does not in any way seem to be behavior that should earn them a criminal record. Now, I do see one problem that we're having now. On the one hand, we've specifically legislated that tourists can buy pot as long as they're over 21. Mm-hmm. Tourists can come into a recreational marijuana store and buy a quarter of an ounce, and they can possess up to an ounce. That's all good. We love tourists in Colorado. We love them. But we're not giving them a place to smoke. I think one of the things that's happening is people are turning to edibles without enough education, and they're ending up just taking too much. And no, it won't kill them, and no, they don't generally need or ever need possibly to go to an emergency room. But if they're not educated, how are they going to know that if you eat too much, you might get nauseous, you might feel anxious? And the cure, of course, is wait a little while, notice what it is, say to yourself, oh yeah, I guess I ate too many of those gummy bears. They were really good. I know personally, if I eat 2 or 3 gummy bears, it's fine. If I eat 4 or 5 gummy bears, I'll end up with a 3 or 4 hour chunk where I was sleeping in, and it's just gone.
Yeah.
Time is just kind of missing. Pleasant, unpleasant, I don't know, it's just missing. So
Yeah,
personally, you have to keep the dose rational.
I think the education is definitely an opportunity in dispensaries, and even before that, I think something that really needs to be talked about is the educational system and how they're going to deal with the new cannabis legalization and how that kind of rolls out. It seems to me that a lot of times those moral conversations in schools run into a lot of red tape. I just know with DARE, there's been some issues, and they've rolled out a better program, I believe. But I know that there's still issues that's going on with them. Last week on our radio show, we talked with Chris Custer, who was talking about Chandra Bana.
Yes.
And she's got a hearing coming up, a custody hearing for her child for basically a school DARE program. Her child challenged some of the information that was being presented, ended up being taken away from her into Child Protective Services.
People that are willing to speak out against the system historically are given grief. The people that are more secure in some of their ridiculous, incorrect beliefs really don't want to hear anything else.
Yeah, and I believe that. I think it just becomes an issue, when families are being torn apart by some of the policies that are in public institutions. And we're very grateful and thankful and blessed here in Colorado and at the university to have supportive administration. In Kansas, it's not so much so, despite the fact that now Congress has legislated the budget to restrict enforcement of prohibition policies in legislation in areas where it's the constituency has made it clear that they don't want the money being spent there, as well as the NIDA coming out in support of medical marijuana for the first time in 40 plus years, I think.
Let me restate something I said because I don't like the way I said it.
Okay.
The people that appear to be stuck in beliefs that are not based on reality or science, those are the people we need to educate perhaps the most. And although they may present the most challenge,
Oh yeah.
they have the greatest need. And one of the things that I keep reminding people of is that, well, you don't want to force anyone to smoke pot. We have absolutely no interest in that. We just want people to have the choice. Personally, what I recommend is that we keep many of our old underground habits. Now we can just call them manners. It's rude to blow smoke in somebody's face. If somebody doesn't want to smell what you're smoking, they should be able to not smell what you're smoking, whether it's a cigarette. Now, cigars should be definitely an exception. If people don't like cigars, hell with them. For pot and cigarettes,
I think that's, totally.
manners. But we still have the tourist problem. We need to give them a place to smoke that is not just use your old habits, take a walk in a park, don't be in public, be in private public places because hotels aren't. Although there are a couple of pot-friendly hotels, most of them have now added cannabis to what they don't want you smoking or vaporizing in your hotel room. I stayed in one hotel where it said, or on the balcony, which of course I paid strict attention to. On the other hand, we have devices now similar to e-cigs. We have the vape pens.
Much more discreet.
Which are discreet, which have virtually no odor. And I understand, are quite effective. It's a good product, I think.
Yeah, from what I've heard, I believe that those are great. I think you're right, though. There's definitely a need beyond the education, but you know, where do these tourists go? It's a huge issue, and I know some of the hotels that you're talking about, like the bud and breakfasts, are actually being pursued, and they're having some of their own issues. Same thing with a lot of the private clubs that have kind of popped up. There's Club 64, the most famous one, came out as a result of the Amendment 64, and they've had issues on issues with you know, their business model and what that kind of looks like.
It occurs to me that it's not just the out-of-state tourists. What happens to the Colorado resident who goes from Lafayette or Boulder and goes to Durango and stays in a hotel? They're in the same position the tourist is in, where we can stick to our old habits and just stay below the radar, which may be wise, but there needs to be an adjustment, so there's a legal way to do that also. And we're joined by Carol Conzelman, who is the brains and brawn behind putting together this full-day Cannabis Symposium in honor of 420 and the university environment. Hi, Carol.
Thank you, Lenny. So glad to have you guys here.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
So we did talk a little bit about the Cannabis Symposium and some of the organization. Do you want to talk a little bit about what we're doing this year and what we kind of hope for in the future?
Yeah, well, first of all, we invited the Chancellor to give the welcome plenary, and that was, the purpose of that was really to honor the administration and the fact that we're carrying out this event on the campus, and to really foster a spirit of collaboration and not opposition, you know. What?
Sorry, you had to be thrilled by his attitude, I would think.
Absolutely. And I was really glad to hear that he was in favor of holding this event on 420. That's our ideal. I mean, my ideal is to have like a big teach-in on the steps of the Norland Library and the Quad, but that would probably raise too many memories for some PTSD or something like that, people from the old system. So we really want to change 420. We want to transform 420 and what it means. And so next year we're going to be holding the event in the Glenn Miller Ballroom. We already have it reserved. So this year, part of the idea was to hold this event in advance of 420 so that students were prepared to educate their peers on 420. And so we also wanted to make sure that we were kind of proving ourselves this year, a little bit more formal environment in the law school, and make sure that there was no funny business going on with people lighting up or something like that if it was on 420. So if we can prove ourselves this year, which so far we are in spades, we have a really good turnout in our first two panels upstairs. It's pretty exciting, and student presentations, et cetera. So then the idea is that next year we can do it on 420. Okay, so then the last panel of the day today is going to be a 420 training workshop. Basically, where do we go from here? And so we're hoping to have a good turnout from participants from the day to have a brainstorming session. What do we want 420 to be? I mean, this is the first year that we have the opportunity to really do it differently now that the campus is open. And I do think that the Chancellor is very much in favor of this kind of approach. And so we'll see what people say. You know, I have a few little ideas. One thing I know what we're doing is, in addition to just basic information tables, is we have a face painter who's going to come and paint whatever people want. You know, no more drug war, legalize it, maybe a pot leaf. And we thought that that would lend the right kind of spirit on 420 on campus for undergraduate students, and also sort of the hidden agenda there is that people will have to stand and wait in line, and then we have more opportunities to talk to them about, hey, so do you know what it means, what legalization means? It's not a free-for-all, it's actually regulated and taxing, things like that, and to really hand out information. We also might have a caricature artist and other things, so we'll see.
I'm thinking we need the pot equivalent of the brown bag for alcohol.
Oh.
I was talking to the chancellor about the year they put out the fish excrement on Norland Quad. I had a pass to be on campus. I was participating in an event, although I can't say it. I was telling the chancellor that the irony was that the only people who played in the fish fertilizer all day were the law enforcement officers. And in fact, one of them chased down the single trespasser I saw, flying tackle, and the officer went sliding through the grass. And the chancellor was laughing, and he said, well, I saw that whole thing. I was watching it from the Norland Library upstairs window, and he saw the same thing. And the irony, it was just hysterical.
I think that's really cool that you guys want to bring back the fun element of it as well. We were talking earlier about moving forward on the professional side of things, but I think that's a very important element to bring to the discussion. Is not just the professionalism and the education and some of the things that we've been talking about, but the cultural significance behind it and the fun. The day itself is a celebration. I think that's a very important element to bring to it. I just, want everybody to be cautious about, what the lines of celebration are, and, making sure that they know that the campus doesn't condone, smoking, because it is still federal property, and until that changes.
Right, especially for undergraduate students under 21. Yeah, that'll be a fine line to walk. I think we have such a deep trauma around this moral policy that we've been suffering under for over 100 years, where, if cannabis is used medicinally, well, maybe that's okay, but recreationally, you're not supposed to enjoy, you're not supposed to want to get high. That was part of the original justification for criminalizing cannabis, was that people only smoke it to get high, whereas people drink alcohol socially and they don't really mean to get drunk.
And then when we get to the stuff that's right on the line, for example, a person who's suffering from depression, who has had bad experiences, ineffective experiences with the pharmaceuticals, who has discovered that with cannabis, they're happy. They're not just saying they're happy and acting self-destructively, they really are happy. They've eliminated the regular pharmaceuticals, and if the medical effect is that it makes you happy, what's recreation, what's medicine? How do you draw the line?
Wendy Chapkus she wrote an article about research that she's conducting with users of medicinal or medical marijuana, and kind of debunking that idea that the psychoactive effect is not medicinal. So she's saying that it is, and that, that alleviation of the stress around chronic illness, chronic pain, terminal illness, depression, things like that, and that pharmaceuticals often bring you down and relieve the pain, as opposed to marijuana really lifts you up and allows you to face the pain. It doesn't eliminate it entirely, but especially like chronic patients with HIV and other kinds of, debilitating cancers, et cetera, that is an important part of the medicinal effect.
We still have the stoner image where a lot of people think that when you smoke pot, you lay on the couch and watch cartoons, and they don't yet see the reality, which is that there are many people amongst us who are wake and bake people, and when they start fading from just pressing ahead with their job, they'll take a toke or two, be re-energized, and they don't go to bed, they go back to work.
Definitely.
And the quality.
Productive.
The tropical varieties of the cannabis sativa plant, more energizing and motivational than, some of the stonier, more potent that a lot of people have been breeding for in the black market. And I think that's, one of the unique things about this new legalization is there's a lot more investigation into what is the medicinal properties of cannabis and whether or not that, psychoactive euphoria is bad. And that's kind of how I always answer that concern is like, what's the problem with getting high? Like if it makes you feel good, how is that an issue? How is that bad? The relief, I know that's a lot of the draw of alcohol is just a little bit of social lubricant, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, and I think in many cases can be medicinal. And, the whole relief portion, what about pain relief? There's a huge issue with pain relief and some of the pharmaceuticals that are being prescribed currently. And marijuana has the potential to relieve that pain just as well, if not better in some cases, depending on the disorder. There's just a lot of opportunity for relief. It's not necessarily a bad thing.
Well, that gets to that moralizing, that we're all traumatized by, really, as a culture, that's somehow bad. But actually, anthropologists have promoted this idea that, in fact, intoxication is the fourth drive of human existence, that it actually ensures our survival as individuals and as a species. So the first three drives, of course, are hunger, thirst, and sex, and everyone takes that for granted, of course. But if you really look at it, the physiological impact of eating, drinking water, and sex is pleasure. That's why they're drives, because we have a desire to do them and they keep us alive and ensure our survival. And so the fact that certain kinds of intoxication, every culture in the world has had their psychoactive plants or psychedelics or alcoholic beverage, et cetera, or other kinds of ways to achieve kind of altered states of consciousness, even without substances, that is part of what makes us human and what allows us to be inventive and develop healing modalities and link together as community and all of those things. And so this is a relatively new concept for me to think about, that I've been exploring with my anthropology students, to really think like, what does this mean? Like, how would this keep us alive? Why is this maybe really a fundamental part of who we are? And the fact that we've just been traumatized by this idea that we're somehow immoral and bad people if we seek that, we need to overcome that.
We recall that the chapter in the Botany of Desire, I believe is
Michael Pollan.
Talks about animals seeking out psychoactive substances.
And
also.
Dinosaurs.
Look where it got them. Now when it's tar, it's something that's an extract with THC. The dinosaurs were really confused on that whole tar thing.
Know about dabs.
What I find amusing when I'm talking about the issue of the non-stoner smoker, I love telling the story of Mr. X. And of course, we know the story of Mr. X, the guy that wrote a number of articles that got attention, talking about how smoking marijuana opened up his thinking and his creativity. After he died, his closest friend came out and shared that Mr. X, in fact, was some guy named Carl Sagan.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Huge.
And I have a feeling that Dr. Sagan did not just sit around smoking pot and watching Captain Kangaroo.
A little bit more productive than that, yeah. Definitely.
But he
Now, my
would have
mother
been
would have
vilified.
said, imagine how productive he could have been if he hadn't smoked pot.
Well,
Yeah, Mom.
That's still up for more, I think, scientific discovery to see kind of where that goes. But we are almost out of time, so I guess, do we need to do anything else for the live stream? Do you guys want to promote anything else? I think everybody else should be checking in for the rest of the symposium. We have almost everything recorded, right?
Yep. The hashtags are Cannabis Symposium 2015 and hashtag, no pun intended, hashtag Transform 420 at CU.
I'm sure the term hash was not put forth by somebody who didn't know what they were saying. I suspect it may not have been a coincidence.
Hashtag 420. I feel like it might have been planned, definitely.
We're excited for all of your participation, and thank you, Lenny, for coming here and setting this up, and Casper, wherever and whoever you are.
Casper Leach is going to put together a show or two on Time for Hemp, that's numeral 4, timeforhemp.com, which is a 24/7 podcast, pro-marijuana podcast. And Casper suggests, encourages, that every time he mentions the word joint, which he seems to work into the conversation around the joint an awful lot, he suggests that all his listeners take a toke. When I'm co-hosting the show with him, I find I can't smoke because I can't keep track of both what the person I'm interviewing is saying and coming up with my list of 3 or 4 ready questions to follow it depending on when they stop. It's a little overloading, and I don't find it conducive for that particular divided attention task.
I definitely recommend notes, and also this is going to be probably airing out on...
What are notes, says Lenny?
Clarity 420 radio, the 420 on the 405. And then Carol, thank you so much for being a huge part of this and putting everything together and having us both out here. And yeah, we really...
Well, as I've said before, Tyler, thank you for bringing me into the SSDP fold as a faculty advisor this year. It's been so great working with you, and learning from you and being inspired by you and the work that you do. And you organized the Cannabis Symposium last spring, and I did the 420 teach-in. It's so funny. I just love that convergence and that synergy, and that's again, going back to the chancellor, that's the kind of validation that really feels good for all the work that we've been doing together. So thank you.
Definitely. And
Thank you.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the teach-in last year? Because I know that was a huge part of the foundation for this year as well, and we didn't really get a chance to cover it.
Well, I mean, just briefly, I guess one of the components of the original 420 teach-in that I put together last spring, and that is I've maintained through this year, and I want to continue to be a part of this, is that I organized it as part of the course that I teach, an anthropology 1200 course on culture and power that I've designed. It's kind of an open topics course, so I designed a whole semester on drugs and drug policy. And I thought, this is a topic that nobody knows about. My students come in and they're just like, I don't know, just say no. That's all I know, And so I thought, well, why have final presentations where they just present to each other in the classroom? By that time, they're speaking to the choir. Why not have them speak to a broader audience of their peers? And so I originally was going to have them just do it in the lounge of our dorm, because we're a residential academic program. But I invited the chancellor just for fun to see if he would come and speak to us. And the guy who was the director of my program at the time, he was like, I CC'd him, and he was like, ha ha ha, you think the chancellor's gonna come? I was like, well, he won't if I don't ask him, so I don't know. Well, and he did. He accepted my invitation. So then I was like, all right, well, I'm going to make this a bigger event, open it to the public. And I organized that thing in 2 or 3 weeks. And it was 2 hours in an evening on $150. We got some sandwiches and Boulder baked cookies. And it was great. It had about 75 people come. So this year, collaborating with SSDP, with Tyler and Kara, I wanted that to be a component. So my students are giving introductory presentations on a selection of panels today, and just providing some necessary background information so that then the panelists can really focus on their own area of expertise, and they don't have to waste their time trying to explain, like, where did prohibition come and why, and da-da-da. So, yeah, and I love that. They're so excited. Have you met some of them out there?
A couple of them.
Yeah, they're just like, I see it in their faces. They're like, wow, this is something real that's happening. So they're waving at me. I need to go help them get set up for their hemp.
It occurs to me that with the educational aspect you're bringing to this, we're going from just say no to just say, I know.
Just say, I know. I love it. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you all for listening.
Yeah, thank you. That was awesome stuff. So,
Let me find the switch. I'm not wearing glasses, I might as well put them on. Off, on.